Hi, everyone. Join us as we take a virtual tour of the Nutley Museum with Museum Director John Simko and also learn about some of the neat projects the Nutley Historical Society is working on. John is an editor, a writer, and a historian who has designed and presented art, architecture, and history tours on both sides of the Hudson River. He often speaks about Nutley history at the Nutley Historical Society and at the Nutley Public Library. And each Memorial Day, he presents a walk in the park, a free walking tour of Nutley's Memorial Parkway that celebrates the Third River and ends with a special visit to the Nutley Museum. John is the director of the Nutley Museum and serves on Nutley's Historic Preservation Committee. He has an undergraduate degree in art history and a graduate degree in architecture. John's history with the Nutley Public Library goes back a few years. In 2014, he co-chaired the Nutley Library Centennial Committee and was responsible for bringing together 50 Masons from all over New Jersey to recreate the original Masonic cornerstone ceremony from a century earlier. Also, since 2017, John has been a judge for the Nutley Hall of Fame, which its ceremony is held every other year at the Nutley Public Library. This presentation was recorded on Saturday, December 5th at 2 p.m. Thank you for checking out this video.
In town, and also a nice mix of newcomers who don't really maybe know yet what a treasure the Nutley Museum is. The Nutley Museum, as Nick sort of alluded to, is part of the Nutley Historical Society. I'm on that board as the director of the museum. And the Historical Society, I like to mention anytime I do a talk, we get great support from the commissioners in town. In particular, Megatucci has really been instrumental in a couple of projects that I've taken on that could not have happened without him. Over the years, I've worked with Commissioner Scarpelli, and he's been fantastic. Tom Evans, Commissioner Petracco, and new Commissioner Kelly have also been very supportive. So I just want to mention them. I also just want to reference the Historical Society. As I say, I'm the director of the museum there, but Dom Tebaldo is our president, Suzanne Hagard is our vice president, and Marianne Lauber is our treasurer. And with a much larger group of board members, we really do try to bring our shared love of Nutley history to everyone. So I want to mention all of that. And in fact, the first slide that you are looking at is a page that I've taken out of or an image from a page from Elizabeth Brown's 1907 History of Nutley. It's the first and then the only history of Nutley that was really written in a book form until Anne Troy's 1960 version. And this saying here still exemplifies, I think, the feelings of the Nutley Historical Society, who remain dedicated to the people of the town of Nutley. So welcome to this talk, and let's get started. So when I was thinking about what to show for a virtual look-see into the museum, I figured I need some great objects that photograph well and that have some interesting stories to go along with them. We've got a lot of those, fortunately. Our wonderful Annie Oakley collection is an obvious choice, and we'll definitely visit some of that later. But I want to show you some local, everyday items as we go through as well. Things like a quarry hammer, a woolen wedding blanket that was woven in town, or you'll see a bottle of what was a bottle of snow back from the blizzard of 1888. So we'll look at all of those really little charming objects too as we go through this. But as I was thinking about what museum items to share with you, it struck me that our number one item is our building itself. We are very lucky, let me just advance this, in our town to have really such a beautiful repository for the treasures of Nutley history that we really do house. So I want to talk a couple of minutes about this building, and it's got a great history. It is this 30 by 50, relatively simple, sort of muted Italianate style brick building that actually replaced a building here that was built a bit earlier. This is built in 1875. It replaced an 1857 building that burned down. It was a wooden building that burned down in 1874. that date is significant. So 1874 is the year that North Belleville people, those of us who became Franklinites, wound up being annoyed that tax money was spent on a different part of town, the southern part. We were annoyed that the municipal government didn't seem to cater to our needs as well. And we finally seceded, and Franklin was born, and that's in 1874. I found it very interesting that the first real significant act that our town makes is to build the first brick school in town. I think it showed everyone that Franklin, we were not yet Nutley, that's 1902, that Franklin can take on a mortgage, it could pay its debts, it could construct buildings like this, and in fact, also making a statement that public education is going to be something very important to the township. So for those reasons, and many more, I really do love the building that we are now in, and I certainly see the Nutley Historical Society is carrying on the tradition, and you're going to see what a workhorse this building has been, a tradition of education. I think that is still our mission, even though we're not technically a school. So I think the location of this building, any of you have seen it, its stately appearance, its contrast with everything else on that block, really make it a familiar sight in town and a landmark for the last 145 years or so. And it really has survived, except for what you can see on the left of the building, a caretaker's cottage that was actually built as classroom addition in the back of the building. It's pretty much the same as it was when it was unveiled in 1875, and that's very special in its own right. So while larger buildings in town, larger schools kept being built, this building kept being turned to. So in 1894, remember this is built in 1875. In 1894, they finally pay off the mortgage for this building. But that's also the year that this building is first closed up as a school. We don't need it anymore because we've just built the school park in the center of town, in the Oval, at least the first section of that. So that is 1894. But 1895, they had to come back to this building and open it again for kindergarten and first graders. 1902, we build Yanakaw School, the first independent grammar school, dedicated grammar school in our town. And in 1907, the second addition to the high school is built. So in 1907, they closed this building down again. Well, 3 years later, it's open because Nutley is expanding, and we keep getting overflows of students, and they keep coming back to this building. Washington School is open in 1911. This poor school closes down again. And then in 1914, it really takes on a new academic responsibility and something very special and very early for the state of New Jersey. It starts a pre-vocational school to train boys in the manual arts. The prior year, 1913, New Jersey began to fund such programs for not just vocational school, but pre-vocational school, so from the earlier grades. And Nutley was one of the first cities to have adopted this. They had the space here, and so they started to use it for that. One of the quotes I found, again, which is certainly reflective of its times, had said that the so-called bad boy or the wayward girl is not so at heart. They become so through parental and social neglect. And so they really wanted to go out of their way. These kids had their own football teams, their own social activities. They merged with the other school as well, but they were really well taken care of. And they were taught things like carpentry, furniture repair, electrical wiring, how to grow plants and cement work. And they had this beautiful program where they would go and the girls had their program in another building. This was the boys' school. They would go out to their neighbors and they would repair houses, furnitures, things like that. And the money that would come in would go into a bank account for these kids when they would graduate from this class. So it really was this fantastic school environment for those years beginning in 1914. The kids not only built 20 workbenches to have their classes in here, we still have one upstairs, and it's really one of our treasures, this great old workbench that the children built. But what I always thought was the caretaker's cottage in the back and built as such. What I learned was that in 1920, these young boys under teacher supervision actually built that because they were now expanding and they needed some extra classrooms. Around that time, they had 34 full-time students in this building, but they had more than 230, 240 that came from all of the different schools one day a week to learn the manual arts as well. So it's something that, that really expanded beyond the school. Be that as it may, this school finally did close down in 1927. 1927 is when what was built as the high school, it's now our middle school, was built. And so once again, we figured we didn't need this school. And this time they really didn't for a number of years. It was closed down in 1927. And for the next 20 years until 1947, it really was abandoned. It was taken care of, but there was really nothing happening inside of it. And in 1947, it is leased to the Nutley Historical Society. The Historical Society, we are just ending, and what a year it's been. We haven't had anybody in our building since March, but we are ending our 75th anniversary, our 75th year. That was in 1945. So the Historical Society began without a home. In 1947, we got a home in this building, and it took 7 years of work by volunteers inside and outside to get this building ready for a museum dedication to happen in 1954. So with all of that in mind, let me just run through a number of pictures of the progression of this building. And by the way, this building is very much tied into the Dutch Reformed Church across the street, where this wonderful picture of the church being erected was taken. And it's the cemetery that ties these two buildings in together. This is the cemetery. To the left is our school. Behind you would be the church. And as you're walking through, you pass Henry Duncan. We're going to meet Duncan in a little while. He ran the biggest mills in town. But off in the distance, you see Henry Steger. And Henry Steger is the individual who gave the property for both the church, this cemetery, and the school across the street. So 1857, he dies in 1869 and is buried here. So it's through Henry Steger, who, by the way, was a grandson of the great Captain Abraham Spear, who just lived up the road, who inherited a lot of land from his grandfather and wound up generously giving that for the school and also for the Dutch Reformed Church. So this is Henry in a very nice place for him to find his final resting spot. Here's a picture of the school, and it's a very early one. It's got to be pre-1921 because you see in the back there is no addition built onto the school. But the school looks very much the same except for a much nicer looking porch in the front. This, again, is the Reformed Church, which has an 1860. Remember, I said that the wooden school was begun in 1857, burned down in 1874, replaced with the brick school in 1875. The Dutch church was begun in 1860, went on hiatus during the Civil War, and then was completed afterwards. So both of them have the same donor, at least for their properties together. This is the school from the side, and you can see this is what it looked like in, let's say, 1945, 1946, when the Historical Society, after it's been abandoned for 20 years, begins to take it over and begin to rehab it. They had quite a job to do. Here you do see the addition built on the back, but you see on the lower floor broken windows still on the side of the building. Here you see those same windows covered over, but you see that the caretaker's cottage in the back has gotten some tender, loving care. Again, here is the building as it looks today. Here is a very nice shot taken back, I believe, in 1950 or 1951 of the addition onto the back. Again, now a caretaker's home, but built by the students of this school for additional classroom. Here's what the inside of the building looked like when the Historical Society took it over. As I say, they had a lot of work ahead of them. This, I would like to think, is Anne Troy painting the window sills, but both inside and outside there was a lot of work to be done. And again, all by volunteers. And not only work, but before the museum opened, this is on that porch in the front. We've got a much nicer porch now. Even auctions. You see the date there, the address rather, 65 Church Street. And this is what I think is a professional auctioneer in the center. Anne Troy is up on the porch in front of that that diagonal piece of wood, and they're having an auction of things that were donated to the museum to be auctioned off to get some money to start to pay for things, these dishes and pots and pans. And again, there's Anne Troy watching over everything. And some of these photos to me just look like they're out of movie sets. They're really sort of beautiful pictures of small town America. This one in particular looks like somebody is ready to yell break, and all these actors are ready to break set. So just a wonderful picture in front of the museum. By the way, the porch that replaced what they're standing on now, remember I had mentioned that the museum is dedicated in 1954. In 1956, the porch that we now walk up was rebuilt, and it was rebuilt from the bricks that were built from the original 1894 Park School building that has now been replaced by the orange brick of Nutley High School that we're all familiar with. So when that first phase came down, they reused those bricks to make a very nice connection with this first brick school in Nutley. This is the only 19th century institutional building left in town as well. So it's got a lot going for it, and it's tremendous. So. That's the building. I just wanted to not overlook that as one of the real treasures that the Historical Society and the museum has. We have treasures inside, but we are inside this really magnificent and meaningful and beautiful structure. So back to that, just a walk around it. This is just an incredible wall, and just wanted to share that shot with you. Here is back in 1945, Frank Spear is cutting the birthday cake for when the Nutley Historical Society was first born. So again, that is, we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of that. Here is our logo. And a nice plaque on the side of our building. And I just wanted to, for those of you who aren't familiar, one of the things that we've missed this year is the building being used by the community. The gallery, the Anne Troy Gallery, is the museum space upstairs. In the basement, we have our archives, and the first floor is rented out. We haven't rented it out, I don't think, since February of this year, but rented out for lots of different parties, and it's really a wonderful, joyful space, and I do miss that about it. This is a brief glimpse upstairs at the museum. Some of the artwork on the wall, some of our special exhibits. We will talk about a couple of things in particular, and this is what we're doing right now. I've got about 1,500 photographs that are being scanned, that are being cataloged, and that we hope to get online for people to enjoy in 2021. We've been building our art collection in the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years or so. We have got artists that were enclosure artists. We've got more local artists as well. So we've really been expanding that. One of the things that we're looking forward to doing in 2021 is to put on an art exhibit, and I'll talk about that sort of near the end. But the two pieces that we've acquired in this picture, or that are new this year, is the piece on the upper right. It is a collage that I'll speak about. That was a donation by the artist, Gary Urbe, who's been an incredible supporter of the museum. And on the lower left, the portrait of that woman, I'll show you close up soon. We were able to afford that because it was not in great shape. That's the first artist to have moved to enclosure. We were able to get that repaired and restored this year, and so that's going to be the basis of a show that we'd like to stage next year. So again, our building as it looked back then, and a couple of the kids that would have gone to that school standing out in front of the front door. This is from 1879. Remember, the brick building dates back to 1875. And by the way, the woman who is standing in the back, I believe to the left of our left of center, is Gertrude Broadbent, who was one of the teachers there. At one point, 1891, I read that there were 113 students in this building, split up into 2 floors, so half on the second floor, half on the first, 1 teacher each, 113 students. So one of the things that we acquired this year and built a show around, and I wanted to share with you guys because it shows a beautiful slice of life in Nutley around the times that we're talking about, 1880s, 1890s, is a series of photographs by this individual whose name is Nathan Carroll. He married into the Kingsland family. And this is Joseph Kingsland, but he would not only take photos of sort of the patrician of the family, but also of the farmhands who worked the grounds. This beautiful picture of a hay wagon in Nutley, not too far off of Franklin Avenue. And he would capture Nutley in these really defining moments. You see the lower stone pier, and you see to the right of it a much taller excuse me, a much taller metal support. This is at the moment when the railroad tracks had to be raised. At Franklin Avenue by Jim Dandy's, it is raised above ground. It used to cross the tracks at ground level, which is not cool for railroads and horse and carriages or cars. So it needed to be lifted, and it needed to be lifted up all the way. So they came back to this area, which probably dates back that pier to the 1860s, and raised it up 8, 10 feet, whatever that is. And then eventually they would have covered the metal supports with stone, and that brownstone pier is no longer there. That would have been removed. So he's got some great photographs aesthetically, but they also capture some very nice moments. This, by the way, is in the park. Looking ahead, you see the guardrails of Vreeland Avenue in the distance. He captured children, his own and the neighborhood kids. This is a fascinating study of these children, at least this group in Nutley. This is his daughter, who he built this 6-foot kite with, and wrote actually a story about flying it. His daughter, again, in the fields of the Kingsland farm. His daughter, now grown up, with this radical new instrument, the bicycle. Elizabeth Cady Stanton said that women, by the way, are going to ride to suffrage on the bicycle. It was a real symbol of and a real freeing thing for young women at the time. And she looks like she's ready to really ride off into her future. She's there with her brother. They're the son and daughter of the photographer. Here she is in a very sweet, lovingly embracing her aunt on an old tree stump that had been cut down. And here she is among some dancers. We haven't quite figured out exactly what this scene or where this scene is, but we know that his daughter is the second from the left in this photo, and it's called The Ring Drill, and it's just a wonderful photograph. So that's what Nutley looked like in those days. I want to get a little bit more urban now and mention a real character in town whose name is Patrick Guthrie. Patrick Guthrie had originally opened a store on Passaic Avenue near Highfield Lane. He opened it as a dry goods store for people to come in and buy foods for all the mill workers in town. Well, within a year or two of him opening the store, all of our mills closed down. Another story for another time, but they closed down. So he wound up rebranding himself, reinventing himself, and the building that you see to the left, the second building up Highfield Lane with the big open porch that's now filled in, the building is still there, is this magnificent 15-room house and ice cream parlor, basically, that that Guthrie had built. Guthrie is a husband, he's a father, he's an inventor, he's a store owner, he's also the assistant fire chief and becomes the fire chief of town. So a very busy guy who runs Guthrie's store. We know him and love him in town because he had the first telephone in town and the only telephone in town for going on about 20 years or so. This is a close-up of the store itself. This is a sign that Guthrie made. It's double-sided. It's very heavy and really beautiful. That would have announced his store outside. This is Guthrie when he's the assistant chief of the fire department. He did rise up to become the chief. Also, when you look at some old maps that are made for insurance purposes, a lot of buildings, a lot of businesses, not only in town, show that they are supplied with a special Guthrie kind of fire extinguisher that he has a patent on. So very cool guy. He also had not only the only telephone, but the only ice cream. Made the only ice cream in town for a number of years. Now, nice businessman. Only ice cream and the only telephone. Here's a famous ice cream dish. It's said, by the way, that Mark Twain, and I've learned to not research myself out of a good story, that Mark Twain was said to have tasted his first ice cream when he visited, which was right in the neighborhood of Henry Bunner, the editor that Twain would have come to visit. So these are a couple of items. So the building opens in the 1880s and doesn't close until the 1950s. His two kids ran it until the very end. When it did close down, the museum got a number of items that were still in the store, and we proudly display them in the store. Here's some of them here. And so he not only sold some food items, he sold a lot of art supplies, soaps, big on the cigarettes and the tobacco, as a lot of stores were back in the day. But again, as I said, we love him as the guy who had the first phone booth. So this phone booth, which has been with the Historical Society, I think since about 1970, again, was the only one in town. So any phone call that Mark Twain would have made when he was here, that Henry Bunner would have made, that Annie Oakley would have made in the time period that she lived here, would have been made from the phone that was in this phone booth. So it really is a very cool piece for us to have. This is called the Johnstown phone booth, very special. It came with a cleaning woman who would come every 2 weeks to clean the oak and to Windex the windows. And while that's not the original phone in there from the 1880s, it is the phone that was in there when the store did close down. You see the picture in the back. Here, this is blown up. This is not Patrick Guthrie, but his son Edmund, who along with his sister May had run that store after their parents' death until they closed it up in the 50s. It's interesting, it says long distance telephone on there. Edmund had received an award. I guess it wouldn't surprise you that when he grew up, he worked for 30 years for the phone company and then retired. But the phone that he had, and remember that the building, Guthrie's, was both their home and the store. So the phone that was in there, this gentleman got an award for having the same telephone at the same address for 78 years. It was the longest one in New Jersey. So that is Guthrie, who's a really great character. And I wanted to show you, we really do treasure having that phone booth in town. I'd mentioned that one of the people who would have used that phone book is Nutley's own Annie Oakley. Annie lived here from 1892, 92 to about 1904 or so, for about a dozen years or so. And she made friends with a number of people, well, with a lot of people in town, but in particular with a family named the Donaldsons, and with a woman who lived in Newark named Catherine Moore. And she left a number of items to them that have been passed on to the Nutley Museum. So we've got a wonderful collection of photographs, and I just want to show you 3 of them showing Annie as she was older. This is Annie, of course, sort of in her height when she is just covered with medals. This would have been when she probably would have moved to Nutley. She moved here right after she came back from her first big European tour with Buffalo Bill's Wild West Circus. Here Annie is a little bit older, and here she is as an older woman still. Really beautiful photograph of her. So we've got a lot of photographs of Annie, some formal like this and some not so formal, and we'll get to those in a minute too. A lot of you probably are familiar with this photo. This is the house that Annie and her husband Frank Butler, and when she was in town, she was she was Mrs. Frank Butler. She wasn't really Annie Oakley, or she was Annie Oakley Butler. But this is the house that they had built on Grant Avenue. It is no longer there. If you go on Grant Avenue, you'll see 2 identical brick buildings dating, looks like from the 50s or so, side by side. You can't miss them, that would have been on this property. We happen to have, from that house, some cutlery of Annie Oakley's, and what I do like about this, at least for this, is we seem to have holly leaves maybe in berries, and these to me have a bit of a festive, maybe even a Christmas feel to them. But these are Annie Oakley's cutlery. This is a very interesting piece. This is made of wood that was taken from Annie Oakley's birthplace, from the house where she was born when it was being taken apart. So we got this actually from Annie Oakley's niece. These are some of the more, which I like more than the formal photographs that Annie would have exchanged with friends of hers that were eventually passed on to us at the museum. This one here on the back in Annie's writing, it says out at sunrise near Leesburg, Florida, and we've determined that that is 1911 as opposed to 1901. Annie is here not with Dave, but with George, who was the first dog that she and Frank Butler had. And this one is called A Rattle Snake Ahead. Again, Florida, 1911. And again, I'll just take you back to that for a minute and see that they are poised. Here is Annie. She had a relationship with the Pinehurst Gun Club in, I think it's in North Carolina, where she taught classes and gave exhibits. And here Annie is to the left with a rifle, with her shotgun, and I've focused in on that so you could see her a bit more clearly. Here's a close-up of it. And what's interesting is this is George with Frank Butler, her husband. And what George is doing there, we're told in the back of this photograph, is George leaping from his stand after I shot the apple from his head, Pinehurst Old Gun Club. So George was trained and trusted Annie enough to sit there while she would shoot things off of his head from that great distance. I just show her here with her rifle as the Rifle Queen. This is a very rare book that was published when Annie was in London. We got this, you can see from the name at the top, through the Donaldson family. This was owned by John Donaldson. Here's another very interesting picture at Pinehurst. And Annie now does not have a shotgun over her shoulder shooting behind her, but she's holding a pistol and a mirror close up to her eye. Here's a close-up of that. She's got a little compact mirror, and she's pointing the picture at Frank, not at the dog anymore, who is holding up a playing card for her to hopefully shoot through. We have, if not that very one, we have a small compact. So again, here she's holding it, that we got from the Annie Oakley collection, I believe through the Donaldsons. And here is Frank, again, that distance away, holding a card in front of him that Annie is shooting sort of casually as she's looking into a small mirror. So the photograph is great, but the fact that we've got this compact is just a wonderful thing to have. Here's the front and back of it. We've also got a number of Annie Oakley's guns. These would have come to us through the Donaldsons. John Donaldson named his daughter, one of his daughters, Anne, and when I look at the time frame of it, I've no doubt that she was named after Annie. But we've got two pistols that belonged to Annie Oakley through the Donaldsons. We also have a pistol that was used by Buffalo Bill. So a really nice collection of those. And for those of us who don't, or those who don't like guns, we've got an axe. This came with a note from the 50s of a gentleman who donated this and said that his grandfather was a newspaperman in Newark. And when he brought his son, so the donor's father, when his grandfather brought his son, who was a little boy, to go meet some of them at this big hotel, he met Buffalo Bill and Annie Oakley. And Annie Oakley gave this little boy this axe, said that she used it in some of her acts. And he sent a note to us with this saying that he hoped that this little thing was something that our museum could use. And it's just a great piece for us to have. This piece is very interesting. It is a leather horse collar, and it was given to Annie. It says from Spratt's Patent. This was given to Annie by the Spratt's Company. Spratt's Company is a company in Newark, New Jersey that was really the first to sell pet foods. Prior to this, people would sell their pets whatever they were eating. Annie was a spokesperson for them. They gave her this. Again, we got this through the Donaldsons because this was meant for a pony, but Annie gave this to John Donaldson so his kids could use it for their big St. Bernard puppy, and they wound up using it as a dog collar, and then it came to us. Beautiful piece. This is a poster that we got from Annie Oakley's niece back in 1948 that we have lovingly restored. I love it because you see all of the little circles around Annie Oakley show things that Annie Oakley did. This was very rare back in 1948 when we got it. And one of the vignettes of that shows a feature of Nutley, New Jersey, amateur circus, March of of 1894. And I'm going to talk about this circus in a minute. We've got a couple of nice objects from it. It was really in a small tent with a roof on it. This looks like it was out in Yankee Stadium. So the artist took some liberties, but Annie did stand on the back of a horse and shoot everything that was thrown up in the air. So it's nice that this poster celebrates in particular one of her feats in Nutley, New Jersey. This is an etching that was made by a Nutley artist for that Nutley Museum, for the Nutley Amateur Circus. It was done to raise money for the Red Cross. You can see at the very bottom of where the clowns are standing, tops of the Red Cross. This is something that I found in the basement about 4 years ago in a number of pieces that you can see. It had all generations of tape. When people used Scotch tape, when people used paper tape, the back of it was a nightmare. Here's what it looks like today. We had someone found a wonderful restorer in Manhattan who took beautiful care of it. This is one that would have hung in Nutley. It's very rare because only a few would have been produced. It's a very big lithograph and it's absolutely gorgeous. Come to the museum when we reopen to see it. These are a couple of photographs that appeared in a newspaper of people the night of that amateur circus. So it was not only an amateur, by the way, because both men and women in Nutley who were electricians or lawyers would train to do an act that night. They were not professional, except of course for Annie. This is a picture of Annie inside the barn that circus took place. What I love about this is the only picture I know of Annie Oakley in Nutley. By the way, she's standing on Molly, who was a delivery horse for the Nichols factory, and Annie trained her to be the horse that she rode on. So even the horse she rode on that night was an amateur. Here is Henry Bunner, who's an editor who you usually see very stoic, who might have tied one or two on that night. The reason that this got coverage in the New York Times, not only because Annie Oakley was going to appear, but because Henry Bunner, who was a famous editor, as I mentioned, friend of Mark Twain, promoted this and was actually the sort of publicity manager for it. Here he is in an incredibly light moment, which the New York press absolutely loved. This is Eaton Stone, whose circus tent this event took place at. He's a wonderful story. Come for another lecture. Maybe we'll do one on the circus itself. It's wonderful. Eaton was not only one of the first circus riders. He would stand on two horses. Bareback was the first guy to do that. He also painted this painting of his own circus, which is on the what was the Hoffman LaRoche property, which is where Eaton Stone's property was. One of the people there at that circus was from the Sterrett family. This is their stables. This is where they would do all of their repairs. There are three generations of horse families in town. Joseph Sterrett was the father and a friend of Annie Oakley at this point. His son Alan was a young boy, maybe 13 or 14 at the time that this circus took place. Someone in the Sterrett family, because they were all about horses, made this beautiful papier-mâché horse. It's got to be a century ago that the museum absolutely treasures. But what Alan did to tie it into the circus is train his dog to ride a horse that night at the circus. And we even uncovered in a box that had been hidden for probably the last 50 years since Anne Troy would have written this note on it, the riding jacket that Alan would have worn that night in that circus as a kid. It's a wonderful piece. And Alan's father, Joseph, threw up a coin that night. Annie Oakley shot it and gave it to young Alan, who kept it forever till he grew into an older man. And this is now this is Alan when he's now grown up. You can see he's holding that coin, showing it off to probably the next two generations of kids in our museum. You see the poster behind him that I showed to you. And before his death, Alan passed this on to the museum. It's just a wonderful piece of Annie Oakley memorabilia with a really beautiful Nutley tie. I mentioned that she was a spokesperson for the Spratt pet food company. She endorsed a lot of different things, Sterling bicycles. So not only did she shoot from horses, but from a bike as well. We've got this great old card of her. This is not Annie related, but this was given to us by Royal Steger, one of the Stegers whose grandmother was given it by a young Indian woman who she met in Clifton. So we display it with this photo here, which is one that we got straight from Annie Oakley, again, through the Donaldsons. And on the back of this photo, in Annie's handwriting, it says, "Little Indian girl we both loved," meaning her and Frank. I don't know more of a story to that girl, but it's a wonderful little card that we have got. So some of these photographs that we've got now from Annie, I just want to run through one or two that are very interesting. This guy is called, his name, he's Prince Regent Luitpold. And when Annie is in Europe and she is being asked to go before all these crown heads of Europe, she is about to do a shooting exhibit with this gentleman. The quick story with this is that he is in this arena and a horse gets loose and is about to run over him, and everybody's looking. Nobody's supposed to touch the Prince Regent. Annie, all 5'0" of her, runs and tackles him out of the way and sort of saves him. And so she's the only woman apparently to have been able to physically assault this guy and to get away with it. So he loves her for that. And you can see he sends her this picture and she writes on the back of it, I don't have the back of it. Well, she writes on the back of it that this is a card that came from Prince Regent Luitpold, who's the man who gave me the diamond bracelet that once belonged to the Mad King of Bavaria. And it turns out that this guy's uncle was the Mad King of Bavaria. He is positioning himself to take over, to rule that area, and he again makes friends with Annie Oakley. So you turn up, as I'm looking through all of these Annie Oakley items, these very interesting stories that go along with them. This guy is the future Edward VII, King of England. Here is his wife, Alexandra. While he was still, the Queen had not yet died, he is the prince. Annie performs in front of he and his wife. When he signals her to come over to shake his hand, and she, of course, goes right to his wife and puts her hand out to her and turns to the soon-to-be king and says, "I'm from America, and where I come from, ladies first." So she sort of sets that up. And again, these people wound up loving her for her openness. On the back of this card, in Annie's handwriting, it says, "King Edward," and at this point he's now king, "of England, sent to Annie Oakley in hand-painted frames on her birthday, 1887. So the King and Queen of England are sending Annie things that they've made. On the back of the Queen's card, oh, I'm sorry, this is the back of the Prince Regent's card, where it says this had been the property of the Mad King. Here is the back of Queen Alexandra's card. Queen Alexandra sent to me in frames, painted special by herself, August 18th, 1887. So wonderful collection of cards that Annie has meaningfully annotated on the back. This is a note that Annie sent to her friend Catherine Moore, who lived in Newark. And we've got a lot of letters from Annie. And a lot of them are later in her life when things are not physically going well. She'd been through not only the train accident, but then a devastating car accident as well. This one is a little bit, has some happiness to it. I just want to read this one to you. She says to her friend Catherine, "Progress is slow, but I haven't given up yet. So warm here," and she's in Florida at this point, "so warm here, no rain. We'll be glad to go back north with the bluebirds. I was out to dinner and out of bed 7 hours today. Lovingly yours, Annie Oakley Butler, Leesburg, February 4th, 1923. Annie passes in 1926 and is not in the best health, and a lot of the letters are her, not complaints, but her real telling her friends about her condition. This is a wonderful little derringer that sat in Griffith's shade shop safe for a number of years, which is where Annie kept it, and it was eventually passed on to us. So this is an Annie Oakley, very small caliber pistol, which we'd like to think was used to shoot this hole in this postcard, which was sent to, you can see, to Mr. John Donaldson, John Duncan Donaldson, by the way, you see the D there, in Nutley. So this is a card that on the back of this, you can see compliments Annie Oakley. and you might say Amityville, Florida. I'm not sure where this was sent from, but I think it's a card that she probably sent, signed a number of them to, and then wound up sending ones, because other cards to the Donaldsons are signed lovingly. But this one she did send off to John, and it's just a wonderful piece to have. This is John Donaldson. Quickly, he is credited with getting Annie to move here. Annie was coming to visit Eatonstone, got off at the wrong train station on Highfield Lane. He's the manager of that station, took her in his buggy, her and her husband, and sold them on Nutley before he got to their destination. Here's this wonderful piece I found with Henry Bunner in his backyard raising a pig. And I happen to notice that in the back center, you see that figure who is this guy, John Donaldson. So friend of Henry Bunner as well as Annie Oakley. Okay, here's the piece that I really want to share about Annie Oakley. It's a sketchbook that I found about 5 years ago in our basement under piles of nothing that I can really describe to you. You open it up and it's got this note in the front page that says, it's got some foreign language on the top. On the bottom it says, sketched by the so-called Messiah 1 year after the Sioux uprising in which Sitting Bull was shot and killed in cold blood. Again, a handwriting analysis shows that this is Annie Oakley's handwriting. It turns out at the top, this is someone else's writing, but this is Sitting Bull's name in Lakota. So in a letter that the Historical Society owns, which seems to be the last letter that Annie Oakley ever wrote, she passed less than a month later, she is sending this book, this sketchbook, to her friend Moore in Nutley, I guess for safekeeping. Who is the so-called Messiah? It's an individual named Wovoka, who is a Native American medicine man, much like Sitting Bull, who started the Indian ghost dance movement, which was a way for the Plains Indians to try to resist the takeover by the white men, which was really a fait accompli at this point. They were not going to be able to do it. And he starts these ghost dances, and eventually Sitting Bull, and she mentions, is shot and killed in cold blood. In the letter that Annie wrote that accompanied this book, she goes on to say the book was made especially for her, and she goes on to then say about Sitting Bull that if he were a white man, somebody would have been hung for his murder. So a very socially aware statement, I think, by Annie Oakley, and a great document for us to have with this book. So when you turn the pages of this book, sketched by the so-called Messiah, it is filled with, and I've taken a dozen of them, not out of the book, but photographed them, of what's got to be 24 or about 30 pages filled with, from edge to edge, these sketches of Native Americans on horseback with different types of weapons, different types of shields, different horses. This one's a wonderful horse. Notice even the stockings on their feet. They're really wonderful. Clearly this isn't a trained artist. The Native Americans were given ledger books and sketchbooks by the American government during the 1880s, 1890s, and many of them used them to document their disappearing culture. Here this Indian is carrying, a Native American is carrying a spear, here a bow and arrow, another bow and arrow, a chief with the long headdress on, and just this wonderful collection. You can see from this figure that these are not just sort of your gerund or your generic Indian. These are portraits. Each one of the faces on these are very different. And this is one of my favorites. This is a fantastic piece, and this one as well. So this is a great find that the Nutley Museum has. By the way, this slide I showed you earlier, when I was noticing it, while all that stuff is going on, while Carol is making those photographs, while Annie is doing all of that stuff, 1890, 1891, our mayor, whose name is Emil Deitch, who's not yet our mayor, he becomes our mayor in about 1912, is accompanying Admiral Peary on expeditions to the North Pole. And you can see in that wooden glass case in the foreground is this incredibly long, it's got to be 8.5 foot long, narwhal tusk that was gifted to us by the family of Emerald Deach. Wonderful piece. A whole nother story, another tour that would take that in, but that's a great thing to come and see. To go back to Annie for a second, she did send out these Christmas cards. I've read where she is credited with being one of the first to send out personal Christmas cards. And this one she sent in December of 1891. She is still overseas, which is why we think that she has got the birds flying over the ocean on the lower left. What I love about this is Annie's monogram on the upper left of this. So this is December 1891, Annie Oakley's Christmas greeting. So back to people who are not so famous, but I think are wonderful things to have in the museum. This one has a connection to Annie Oakley. This is a baby book of one of Nutley's citizens who passed within the past year. The connection is that when this person was 2 years old, she was told, Annie Oakley came to visit her aunt and held her and kissed her. This is that person as a real newborn. Some of you who know her may see her face in this adorable little picture in the field. And in this one in the sled, this is Ruth Bedford. And that is Ruth Bedford's really beautiful book that her mother lovingly kept her whole life. But Ruth told me that not only did Annie come to visit her aunt, and I know that her uncle was named as one of the executors of Annie's will, so they were very close, but Annie picked her up and kissed her, and I think it's a beautiful connection, and for that reason and many more, we are sorry to no longer have Ruth among us. One of our treasures is this piece, which I just had reframed. And it is hanging downstairs. You'll see it when you come to the museum. It is dated to 1911, and it is a panorama of Nutley, a watercolor that was rolled up for probably 40 years in a back closet, and thank God, because it has not faded. It's now behind really great high-quality UV-protected glass. I happened to come across just 2 or 3 days ago, and October 14th happens to be my birthday, figure that out, but 1911, here is an article in the Nutley Sun that shows in that little pencil vignette in the very back hanging on that wall is this very painting, this watercolor, and it's hanging in Madison Square Garden. During I guess what could be a real estate or a building show for the Nutley Realty Company. This shows Nutley Park and Nutley Heights, 2 sections that the Lambert Company was developing. This was really a promo piece for the company that a local artist named Arthur Elder did and was left to the Historical Society. Here are a couple of shots that I tried to take through the glass. Here, you can see in sort of the center right, the brick building with the 2 smokestacks is the original Yanakaw School that was built in 1902. This is our town hall after it got its second roof. This is the hat that it wore from 1909 till maybe the 1950s to what it looks like now. You can also see to the left of that what is now the optometrist. It was Nutley's first bank, and Vincent Methodist Church behind it. To the right, what's beautiful is that you see the first phase of the Nutley School Park, but you see kids playing baseball where they're playing today, more than 100 years later. So that's the Oval. Here's a train that came through town. And by the way, this is to tell people that we have trains that come through town. We have banks, we have schools, we have all of this stuff. Come and build your home or buy one of my homes in Nutley. Here you see the baseball game taking place in front of the first phase of the school. It's this building, by the way, that you see when that was knocked down in 1956, that the bricks were taken to build the porch in the Historical Society building. Just a close-up of that structure. Here is Jim Dandy's. Some of you might recognize. This is Franklin Avenue with the trolley tracks. It was not Jim Dandy's at the time. It was the Masonic Hall. And the building that you see to the right with the car parked in front of it across the street from the train station is William Lambert's real estate office. The car was always there, so you'd come off the train, he'd drive you around town and sell you a home. This is a wonderful little detail of our Historical Society and the Dutch Reformed Church across the street. Really sweet little detail to have. And this is a home now called the Donaldson House that's on Vreeland Avenue, but at the time that Arthur Elder painted this watercolor, he was living in this house. And while a lot of other buildings are not here, he really concentrated, for the guy who paid him the money, on the areas that were being developed. He sort of couldn't help himself to lovingly sketch in, I think, his own little abode there. I want to just touch on one or two pieces that we have that are related to some great Nutley history. So you guys know one of our early industries along the Passaic River in the Avondale section were our quarries, brownstone quarries. So just a few pictures of them. This shows you how extensive they were. We've got a quarry hammer that was left to us by an individual, his grandfather's hammer, that gave it to us. And we've also got some nice pieces of brownstone. This was recently given to us by, it was from a farm on the Gerald on the Belleville border. And it was in this family's possession from the time that it was built, the Francisco farm. They've had this since the early 1800s. They've sort of run out of descendants and were thrilled that they could bring it back home. They now live out in Nazareth, Pennsylvania. So local Nutley brownstone, a trough forever. Here is something on permanent loan from the Vincent Methodist Cemetery, a sad 2- and a 3-year-old headstone, but again, carved, beautiful work, carved out of Nutley local stone. This is the cornerstone from the Lamont paper factory that came down a couple of years ago, and we managed to get this piece for the museum. And of course, those two big pieces of stone are from the original St. Mary's Church, which was right near all of the quarries. A lot of you might remember that church here, built of Nutley brownstone. The other thing is our mills, and I mentioned Duncan earlier. We saw his grave. Let me go right back to it, because Henry Duncan owned the biggest amount of mills in town, the Duncan family. He's also buried in that cemetery. And here is Henry standing with the hat on in the back at our town hall. Our town hall is the last surviving mill building in town, and this is Henry standing there with it. This is our town hall. Before it got that hat I showed you just before, this is when it was a 2-story mill building. If you go and look at it today, you'll see that there is a brick 3rd floor to it, but the style is very much the same. Go and look next time. You'll notice a difference in the brickwork as you get up to the 3rd floor. This is the size. This is the Stitz mill. This is how big some of the mills would get in town. So I just wanted to share that with you. And we happen to have this beautiful wedding blanket that was woven in the Duncan mill in town. It's from the Spear family. This is Anne Troy. A lot of you have heard of her. A lot of you know her. I think a bunch of you still remember her. We were recently by John Teen, who was past president of the Nutley Historical Society, and I think for the last decade of Anne's life, her guardian, he gave to us, and by the way, the upstairs gallery space is the Anne Troy Gallery, dedicated in 1980. This was this wonderful button of Anne's that I found. But he gave us recently this desk and the telephone, which Anne used her whole life, and she used it in her apartment just up the block, and used it when she was writing the 1960 history, Nutley yesterday and today. So it's a great piece to have. This is the telephone that he said she talked a lot. She talked probably to every important Nutleyite while she was putting all that stuff together on that phone. So I hope when we reopen, we are going to have a permanent Anne Troy exhibit that's going to sort of start at this desk. So this was a wonderful thing to get this year. And now I just want to show you one or two random things. Nick, I think I would ask you to maybe take everybody's temperature and see if we are going over and whether we can go for another 10 minutes or so.
Okay, I'll send. I'll send out.
Okay.
Ask people to respond. Let's see.
In the meantime, I'll continue. So I've just got a couple of items here that I just was really struck by how beautiful and perhaps even random that they are, but that you find in our museum. This is a grease pot made by, it says, grandfather John Butler at the age of 85 in England and brought here. So this is a piece carved from a single piece of wood that you would open and this mechanic would have had grease in there that he would have used. Just this wonderful little piece that that's nice to come and see. This is what I was talking about, a bottle now of air. This is snow that somebody put in during the winter blizzard in March of 1888 and gave it to the museum. It's a great piece for us to have. This is a wall lamp from Franklin Theater. When it came down, we got a hold of that. This we found no more than 2 or 3 weeks ago in an Anne Troy box, and it was given by, I think, Anne Troy's sister-in-law. It is a silk scarf that was worn by a sailor from Nutley on the battleship Maine that was bombed to start the Spanish-American War. So a fantastic piece for us to have. Then you find random photographs. This one happens to be of the block that I live on when it was first laid out in 1892. Close-up even shows my house, which is the middle one on the left. Was thrilled to find something like this. Once we get all of our photos scanned and cataloged, I'm hoping that this is something that everybody can come and search for. We've got a great art collection that we are building. This individual in the top hat is not only the reverend across the street in the Reformed Church, but he is also a painter who painted these 2 works of art. This is Warren Vreeland. This painting just came back to Nutley after having been gone for about 90 years. It's a member of the Kingsland family. Warren Kingsland Hay recently passed and left us a number of items from their family. This is a wonderful little painting of a mill in Nutley that Silas Monsieur generously gifted to us within the past year. This is a painting by Arthur Hober, one of the original enclosure artists that we were able to purchase about 2 years ago. Wonderful piece. This is what is going to start the art exhibit that I want to have in 2021. This is the first artist to move to enclosure. You can see the shape of the painting when we purchased it, not only the hole in it, but also the dark brown that's on this woman's lace. We have recently had it restored and it's absolutely beautiful. And this will be the basis of a beautiful art show that we will have. This is a little detail of the painting. We've got pieces by Reginald Marsh, by Michael Lenson, including Michael Lenson's brushes. Contemporary artist, and I'm sure the best painter of them all, is Gary Urbe, who is a real friend of the museum. This is a photo that I took of Gary at a show that he was having. He builds collages and then paints the painting of his built collage. This is a painting of that piece. You can see in our museum, Gary gifted us the collage that he made from which he painted. So a really wonderful thing for our museum to have. Gary now lives on the enclosure, and so he joins our enclosure and dominates our enclosure wall of artists. Here is Gary back a number of years ago when he unveiled a painting that he did of Annie Oakley at the museum. Magnificent piece.
Okay.
Nick?
Yes.
So I'm at the end game where I'm just going to talk about 2 projects. Tell me whether I should wrap it up or do these.
We got the thumbs up to keep going.
Excellent, good, thanks. All right, so what I want to just mention are a couple of projects that the Historical Society has been involved with in the past. I think this was 2019. The past year, again, we're 2. We haven't been able to do too much this year. There are a series of, the mural you're looking at is 6 feet wide at the bottom, to give you an idea of the size of it. There are 5 of them that are in the middle school that were painted by students when it was a high school in the 1930s. So these are 85 years old or so. A couple of years ago, I noticed this is beginning to happen to one of them. By the time the alarms really got sounded, and these are about 6 feet off of the ground. There are lockers down below it, and they're in this niche about a foot into the wall. So when you walk down the hall, a lot of people don't even see them or notice them. By the time that I got there to really try to get something done with them, this piece had fallen off and the school had saved it, but we knew we needed to do something. I was talking to Silas Monsieur about this, and he just immediately, he saw that this thing needed to be repaired or we were going to lose this, and just very generously said, let's get this one done, and allowed me to not only get this repaired, but to start a project and a fundraising project where we were able to repair and restore all of the 5 murals that are hanging there. So this one was at that stage, became this when my restorer came in and took off everything that needed to be taken off. All of these pieces were saved, put back together. Here is the mural today. Really fantastic job. This was on the 3rd floor, got a lot of coal dust over the decades. I wasn't sure what was going to happen with this one, what it was going to look like. Restorer started on it, started to take some samples of how to clean it. And here it is with just one spot left. I mean, it's now completely clean, and it's just absolutely beautiful. A lot of you may know Vivian Ficus. She has signed this on the lower right when she was still Vivian Noyes, a high school student. She goes on to not only to be an artist as an adult, but she designs the Nutley flag that a lot of us know. So this was a fantastic project that, again, Silas started. But Ruth Bedford was also very instrumental, and then a number of citizens from the ShopRite and other citizens just stepped forward and really took these on. And I couldn't have been happier. Then I found that there was an empty niche up there. 6 niches, the kids only did 5 of them. What the Historical Society did was we started a contest. A competition for this piece. We told kids about that Nutley amateur circus that we told you about and said this should be the newest mural. So I think 17 middle and high school students submitted what are called maquettes, studies for what they wanted to be, half size of this. Gary Urbe, the artist, took us through a competition series, and this is the piece that wound up winning and was translated into a full-size mural painting. So this is now filled with this, and this just happened. Town historian John Demmer helped me hang this maybe 6 or 8 months ago that this went up. So finally, after 85 years, we not only cleaned all of those murals, but we were able to fill in the final niche and complete that mural series begun 85 years ago. The project that we're working on right now, I wander around a lot. I wandered in the school and saw those murals. I wandered into Vincent Methodist Cemetery, and those of you who don't know, it's off of Passaic Avenue where the Methodist church used to be. And then in 1909, it moved up to be closer to the center of town and became the Vincent Methodist Church. Of course, they couldn't move the cemetery, so that's still where it is. So in the back of this was the original school building, church building there. That's now gone. This is the new Vincent Methodist Church up on the top of the hill. But what I found laying in the back for probably 40, 50 years were these metal gates. Didn't know much about them, knew that they were beautiful and really old. Here is a picture of them when they were erected. This again is right off of Passaic Avenue, almost where Park Avenue ends at a T, right into Passaic Avenue. And this is the gates as they led into the cemetery. You could still go into the cemetery through this opening. The gates are no longer there. So this is what they look like, and the backstory is that this gentleman owned an estate on 135th Street and Broadway, Manhattan. His name is Oswald Ottendorfer. When he passes, and this is from the Hudson River looking up at one of the pagodas on his estate. His estate is actually the buildings way in the back of this, but it was the only picture I could get to show you what this guy was like. So he passes. And in 1900, 1901, a lot of pieces of the estate are put up for sale. So they wind up being purchased, long story, but the bottom line for this is they are purchased by Charles T. Barney, who's a real estate guy working both sides of the Hudson, and a Joseph Hay. And they wind up giving them to the Methodist Church, and they get them in about 1902, and they're told they're 100 years old at the time of purchase. So these gates are from the very, very early 1800s, very likely. So they had to be saved. They really were not doing any good just laying there. So again, I wound up having a discussion with Silas about these pieces. Silas is a member of the congregation there, and again, his feeling was, yeah, these do need to be saved. let's see what we could do about it. And that meant that Silas was going to be very generous with allowing me to do some things with this. So they're now sitting out in Pennsylvania, having been totally sandblasted to original cast iron. This is my man Dana, who's doing the work out there. Here they are. There were 4 of these curved pieces laying there. And here are the 2 posts. And I just want to show you again with 100 years of paint on it and clean. These will eventually be painted black. But here's the detail, and here's what it looks like. You can see underneath the horizontal bar that there's no welding. These are all held in with drilled holes and a hot metal a bar being driven into there that would eventually cool down and hold that spear, in essence, in place. Here's another beautiful detail. Here it is all clean. You see the same thing with that pin at the very bottom of this. So the analysis by these metal workers confirm that these are incredibly old and beautiful cast iron gates. Here's a great example of that. And you can see that metal that goes through there that hold all of these pieces together. Nobody's welding anything. This piece here and this, which look out, this will be our, I think, our Valentine's Day card from the Historical Society next year. So these things are now waiting for me to go up there and to approve some repairs that are made on them, for them to show me that they can be put back together. And then we are going to erect them either in front of or close to on the side of the Nutley Museum. So they're going to be sort of this outdoor sculpture, and we haven't figured out the exact place yet, but there'll be a beautiful addition of some really great ironwork that we plan to put out there for everybody to enjoy. I'm right at the very end where I'm going to just mention 3 or 4 random things you walk by. This photograph, which is of the mud hole when it was a water company, owned by Joseph Hay, the same guy who gave those gates, by the way. On the back of it, interestingly, along the top it says Nutley Water Company, which this guy owned and developed, and then wound up selling to the town of Nutley. So you see this is 1890. The first long line says plant, meaning water plant, sold town in 1896 for $48,750, which is an incredible amount of money today. Then you see town represented by Abram Blum, John White, and Thomas Nichols, commissioners at the time. And they're bracketed, and it says by them, offer. This is what they offered this guy for his company. Offered, and he put $25,000 with a quote that says, and if this is refused, the town will erect its own plant and obtain water elsewhere. And then he, of course, sold it to them. He was offered 25. He sold it to them for $48,000. And tellingly, on the lower left, he writes this very funny little quip that says, robbers rarely succeed in amateur holdups. So he felt he got one over on the mayor and the commissioners. He was not going to be held up by them, and he held out for nearly double the amount. And so he, by the way, with that water company, had supplied water to about 600 buildings in town in the 1890s, and then to expand it to the rest of the town did wind up purchasing it. So it's this wonderful photograph, and I understand the water that's spraying up in the middle was a way to gauge the pressure to make sure that that was always where it should be. But there's an upside down pine tree or Christmas tree hanging in the middle there that if anybody knows what that is, get word to us. This is a wonderful photo of one of the Vreelands, and it tells me, and I just found this in an envelope, that the Vreeland family, this guy, his wife, and his sisters, he served in the Civil War, made this enormous flag and is given to the Nutley Historical Society. So a wonderful piece. This is the uniform of Gerald Ferraro. His grandson gave me this. He told me this was the first Italian police captain in town. And he wanted the museum to have, he didn't know, and his grandson was now older and didn't know what to do with something that he cherished very much. So he gave it to the museum. I have his nightstick, you could see, his captain's hat, his police badge, and what I think our museum is all about was he had what turned out to be I think 7 generations. So this was this guy's grandfather, and he had his own great grandkids there for this event, just to see that I put the piece out, and we would lovingly show it. So again, to me, this is what our historical society is all about, and it was really a terrific moment. Lots of tears by that family there that day. And then this piece here. I thought I had so this is a close-up. Let me actually, this was a picture where these two figures actually, and I blew it up too early, showed just, and it was just a curled up little photograph. And then when I blew it up and looked, it was just these two wonderful people who are so happy and in love in this moment caught in time that, again, was just laying amongst a lot of other things that you pick up and you just really feel very joyful to see in the museum. This I am using as a warning and a plea to everybody out there. These people remain anonymous because nobody wrote on the back of our photographs. You can't imagine the value that is added to photographs that I find in my museum that have a name on them, a date, a location. Go home and archive all of your family photos and write some pertinent information on them. The last piece I want to leave you with, again, is just a picture that I found on the way out the door yesterday. And to me, this is what the museum is all about. We have a lot, or had a lot, of kids groups, whether they are the 3rd grade, which came to us every year, or Boy Scouts and Girl Scout troops, and they're just wonderful in the museum. They love everything about it. We love to have them there. And you can see how long this tradition has been going on with that wonderful photograph there. I think that is the end of that. I will end with the slide that I began with, and then I would just mention to you again, I thank you for hanging in a little bit later, and to look for to visit our website. I would like to be starting an Instagram soon that would keep people informed as to what we're planning to do in 2021. Again, I would love to get that walk in the park back on Memorial Day, but I would also love to get a bus tour going of all of the Nutley murals that are in town, and a couple by Nutley muralists that are also in Newark as well. So that's something I would like to push for. We're going to have the big art exhibit where we would like to invite a couple of contemporary artists to show along with us. So look for news coming out of the Nutley Historical Society. Reach out to us. We are here for you guys. And thank you very much, Nick. Thanks for including me in this.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the amazing presentation. Amazing how much beloved history we have here within town. And I looking at those murals, I remember going to school and seeing those murals, and it's just amazing to see them now and how well done that they are done.
Good. I like to hear that.
We got a couple questions. People commented here. The first one was Franklin Avenue. Who was that named after?
Well, it's Franklin Avenue because we were Franklin, New Jersey. When we had seceded from Belleville, the 1894, we were Franklinville, and then we became Franklin. Then 1902 comes around, and I can't tell you exactly why the decision was made, but we decided to rename the very same town as Nutley. What I will tell you, what came out in that discussion is that Franklin, and I'll say for the town, but I'm sure it's for Franklin Avenue as well, was named after not Ben Franklin, but his son, who is the last colonial governor of the state of New Jersey. And my understanding is that he was as much a Tory as his father was a patriot. So after the Revolutionary War, nobody was so excited to be named after that Franklin. And that is one of the reasons. The other was, I think we were under the impression that there were a lot of other Franklins in the United States, probably some in Jersey as well. Nutley was unique, so we named it that. But again, the Franklin question is, I'm sure the avenue was named after the town. The town was named after Ben Franklin's son.
Thank you. Okay, I just got a couple more here. About Annie Oakley. Did Annie live close to the enclosure and have any friends there? And also, did she ever perform at the Memorial Park?
So she did live near the enclosure. If you know where Grant Avenue is, I mean, it is maybe, a 5-minute walk from enclosure. I know that she was very close with H.C. Bunner, the editor, and Bunner was very close with the people on enclosure. Annie thought of herself also as certainly a performer, an artist. And so, yes, my understanding is that she was very close with the people in the enclosure community. All of them would be meeting at Guthrie's. Guthrie's was, no more than a 5-minute walk away from any of them. She would have had to pass Bunner's house on her way there. And Bunner, again, it was Bunner and Annie that really were two of the people that really put together that amateur circus. So I think the short answer is yes, she was very much involved with that community. And the only local, meaning Nutley, performance that I know of, that's not to say that she didn't, but the one that is at least written about is the one that happened in the circus tent on Eatonstone's property that eventually became the Roche property. So I don't know about, was the question about Memorial Park? Did she?
Yeah, if she ever might have performed at Memorial Park.
And so one of the reasons that she wouldn't have done that, to drill down, is that up until really maybe 1920 or so, 1917, after World War I, when they begin to develop, we are approaching the 100th anniversary of Memorial Parkway. Prior to them developing it as the Parkway that we know, it was more raw, open land. It was not really a park that people went to. So the park as that didn't exist when Annie lived here. I think she's out of here by 1902 or something. So no, and I don't know of any place else in town that she did. I may be wrong about that, but I don't know of them.
There's sort of a follow-up with the beautiful mural painting of the panorama map. Such a beautiful painting. Is it possible that Annie's house might have been somewhere on that map?
I'll look again. It is possible. The reason that I think not is, again, it was done specifically as a promotional piece for William Lambert's Realty Company. So what I've noticed, and in particular for the two areas up near Bloomfield Avenue and Hillside, up in that area of town, and over by where Whitford Avenue is. Those were the two areas that are concentrated. So when you look at those, you see individual homes. You also see in the middle of town, as I said, part of it was to tell people, we have a bank, we have 4 churches, we have, we're a nice community, come live here. But when he goes off to, for instance, my house is not on there. Maple Place and the Mud Hole are not on there, and so I don't think Annie will find Annie's house, because everywhere that was not a Lambert property to be sold to somebody is kind of fudged. It's made to look like nice country, but he's not getting specific even with streets. But you piqued my curiosity. I'll take a look, and I don't know how to communicate that answer, but I'll see if Grant Avenue is even on that map.
Is it possible, just to follow up with that, roughly what year was that painted?
So it's funny because I had estimated, it doesn't have a year in it, but what I did see on it is that that on Chestnut Street, the bank, which is now our optometrist, and Vincent Methodist Church are both there. I know that both of those are built in 1909. I see that the library is not there. The library was built in 1913, 1914. So I figured 1911, 1912, but the newspaper that I found a day or two ago that I showed you, that showed the picture of it in Madison Square Garden, is dated 1911. So I think 1911 is the date for that painting, and it's borne out by the buildings that are there and not there.
It's a beautiful painting.
It really is, yeah.
I love just looking at all the town from the aerial view.
People, when they come to events, that's why I keep that one downstairs. People love to go and find their house or talk to each other about the different sections. It's a great piece for us to have.
And there's just one question here. Any idea what the building is or was behind the town hall just before the Spitz Mill slide?
Yes. If I'm thinking of the picture, and I think it's the one of the 2-floor, the old one when it's the mill. And if you're looking behind it to the left, you see what is a white house.
Mhm.
And that is, and I'm going to see if I could find that picture, that is Henry Duncan's, the Duncan House. So the oval, where the town hall is now, I had mentioned that that is, town hall is the last mill building. There were a number of other mill buildings that were on the oval itself. And so the Duncan family had their main home built on the site where our library is today, and that overlooked the oval. So from the point of view, and I'm not finding that slide, but from the point of view that you're looking at that town hall, which was the mill at the time, behind it, there is a white structure, and that is the Duncan House, which is on the site of today's current library, the building that you're sitting in now, Nick.
Oh, wow.
And that also was a library for a year or two before they, informally, before they knocked it down and made the library there. So I think that answers that question.
Yeah, that was, I think that's, really kind of going full circle, it's amazing. Like where I'm sitting now is where that was. It's amazing.
Yeah, that is very cool.
And there was a question here. Somebody is asking, can you please display the 1911 Bird's Eye painting again?
Okay, we'll do.
Yeah, we love that painting. And I'm looking for the enclosure. It's such a great painting.
Okay. Looking at it far away right now. So enclosure, again, I'm going to guess is not on here, but let me orient everyone. So if you see where the railroad bridge is, that big diagonal that goes across it, it crosses the bridge at Franklin Avenue where Jim Dandy's is. Then if you look further into the painting, sort of almost up on middle center is the town hall and our oval. And then when I do this, my cursor, you don't see that, do you, Nick?
We do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
So here is Center Street, right? Going past, here would be Vreeland House, and here would be Passaic Avenue, right? Here's where the trestle would be over Passaic Avenue. So enclosure would be somewhere in here, and it's not really detailed. So I would say no. And looking at this right now as I'm talking, Grant Avenue would be somewhere, I think, right in this area here. I'd have to get into this a little bit more. I'm just sort of speaking as extemporaneously here. But again, I don't think you're going to find those areas detailed because that was not what Elder was being paid to spend his time on. Let me see if this one is any better. Yeah, so this one's not quite far enough. So where I have my cursor here, this is would be essentially, here's the train track, right? Here's Passaic Avenue. So Vreeland Avenue would kind of be here, right? Where my cursor is. Here's where Arthur, and here is where the mud hole would be. So enclosure is generally this area where I'm circling here. But again, I don't think you're going to find much to find there. But I haven't really looked at that in great detail. But that is definitely where enclosure is, which would make this Highfield Lane, and I guess this Grant Avenue. Annie's house would be somewhere right around here. So I don't really see it on here. But I haven't, I'm just going to confess, I haven't gotten into this with detail. I'm looking at it with fresh eyes as you guys are. So I'm not positive I can answer that.
Where would the library be again?
The library would be not in this photo. Let me go back to this one. So where my cursor is now is Town Hall, right? Where my cursor is now is the bank on Center Street. So right where this little grove of trees is, that's where the library would be.
Now, I wonder if any of those trees are still there.
Now, if the streets are still there, they've gone through different names. Like, again, I just don't have the, all right, so here, Nick, here again is,
like the tree,
Chestnut
the tree
Street,
itself, though.
Town Hall.
Yeah.
And now the part of the old school that is still there is back here, right? And here's the parking lot here, and the library would sit right about here.
Amazing.
So I hope that answers things. And yes, come and see this building, this mural at our school. All right. Anything else?
Everyone's loved the presentation. A lot of great feedback.
Good.
And thank you so much for presenting for us, John, and everyone also for attending today. I want to see that painting again, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, good.
But yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing, and I want to learn more about Guthrie's now too.
Yeah, Guthrie's is a great story. He's a great character. All right.
Okay, everyone. Well, everybody enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and thank you, John.
Thank you, Nick. So I'm going to stop share and back out, right?
Yep.
Okay. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.